That's honestly the worst bit about speaking, is the bit where you put your laptop up and you think, it's not working. Hey everybody, how you all feeling? Day 2, ready for this? Yes. Oh, there's definitely a level of enthusiasm at the front. I want to talk today about platform engineering and how to build something people actually use. But actually, what I want to talk about is how to build something that people like to use. Because you can make people use stuff, but you want them to like to use your platform. But before I start, I want to do a check, and you are going to have to do something now, which is I'd like to see a show of hands for those people who are in a team building some sort of platform. And who are in teams where you're primarily using some sort of platform? Great. This is great, because you are my people. Right. I want to talk about my time working at the Financial Times. I was there for 11 years, and I started off as a senior developer in a team building the content API. So I was using platforms. I moved across to run operations. I ended up in a platform engineering team. So I've done both things. And about 10 years ago, I was working on the content API at the FT and using the original platform that the FT built, which was called FT Platform, imaginatively. Had loads of positives, actually. I think, given the timing when it was built, it was great. I could spin up a server in minutes, whereas previously we'd had to wait for someone to put a server into the data center and configure it. It came with a CI/CD pipeline. It came with logs being shipped to a log aggregation tool. It had monitoring. That was all really, really good, except that I was a developer, not an infrastructure engineer, so I didn't have permission to deploy code to the server that I spun up. So I could spin up 10,000 servers. I couldn't actually just put my code on any of them. And it's because the people who were building that platform were infrastructure engineers who was really focused on the problem, but they weren't thinking about the use cases. They weren't thinking about how the job that I wanted to do as an application engineer. And it was worse because we were also, as application engineers, moving towards the idea of doing microservices. So it wasn't that I spun up a server once every 6 months. I spun up a service every week. So what I actually did was the director of engineering had infrastructure privileges, and I got him to come and do the setting up the code. And when I'd done that about 3 times, they gave me the permissions that I needed. And the team that was building the platform couldn't really keep up with what everyone needed. So they built this thing so you could deploy one service per virtual server. They weren't really thinking in terms of containers. We'd moved to the cloud, but we couldn't use any of the data stores or queues that were provided. So we were managing our own Kafka clusters, which is not something that's a lot of fun as an application team. They weren't keeping up with what we needed, and eventually there was a lot of tension, and eventually the CTO said, teams can go and do what they need to do. So not long after this, this is just a subset of the things that we had in the Financial Times at this point. So there were some microservices built in Java, but we then moved to Go because we found it more efficient, but there still were some running. Front-end teams used Node. The infrastructure teams used Python because obviously you just couldn't get anyone to agree on languages at all. We had things being deployed to AWS on EC2. We were using Lambdas. We had teams using Kubernetes. We had the web team was deploying to Heroku. And we used lots of different data stores. We even had 3 different ways of tracking tickets. We had Jira and Trello, and basically the FT at this point, there was no single way of doing anything. Eventually, I ended up running the platform engineering team at the FT. So it was a group of teams, any team that did anything to support engineers. So it included operations, infrastructure type stuff, security engineering. And I was looking at this huge amount of variety and thinking, well, what are we going to do that's going to create an impact? Because it's hard to support lots of different alternatives in an organization. But we did have, the ft.com team were fully on Heroku. The content API team and the membership team were fully on Kubernetes. And why would either of those groups want to spend a year or more moving to an alternate tech stack? Well, the answer is they're not going to do it because they don't deliver any features. They get a bad rep because all they're doing is this platform work, it's migration. We could have chosen one central platform and forced people to migrate to it, but it isn't what we did. And I think it would have been a mistake. And that's because I don't think the job of platform engineering is to build a platform. We were called engineering enablement, not platform engineering, very deliberately. because we were there to enable people. Sam Newman wrote this blog post a year ago. It's really worth reading. I had one of those things where you're reading it and you're going, yes, yes. It's like, basically, don't call it a platform. Don't call it a platform team, because a team that's called a platform team sees their job as building a platform. Well, maybe that's not what you should be focused on as that team. And Sam quotes this, and I love it. It's a really great definition of a platform from Evan Bottcher. It's a foundation of self-service, APIs, tools, services, knowledge, and support. It's a compelling internal product. So you need to think of it as a product. But what I like about this definition is it says, the reason you're doing it is so that other teams can deliver product features at a higher pace with reduced coordination. This is the purpose of platform engineering. It's to make other teams able to move with a fast flow of value. That is what you should be doing. So I would think of my team's role as providing a secure, observable, cost-effective way for product engineering teams to deliver a fast flow of value. And that's fast flow of value with the idea from Team Topologies. And if you haven't read Team Topologies, I really do recommend it. It's a really good book thinking about organizational structure and how you can work effectively together so that you're not getting held up a lot. So we needed to build tools that could be used by the teams that were on Heroku and the teams that were using Kubernetes and anything else that was being done at the FT. Lots of technology involved in modern software development is pretty common. Whatever your domain, you need to solve this problem. And these aren't the sort of areas where people need to be innovative and have alternate solutions, generally. There's not a lot of benefit from that. If you solve these sorts of problems, you reduce the cognitive load for teams. And cognitive load is the amount of stuff you have to have in your head. And we all have a limit in how much stuff we can keep in our head, and teams do too. And where a team has exceeded their cognitive load, they're doing a lot of context switching. They're probably feeling under a lot of pressure, and you can spot it because people don't have time to bring other new members of the team up to speed. They don't have time to share their knowledge, and you end up, we can't do that because the only person who knows it is Vicky, and she's not here today. And you have that idea that cognitive overload is there. But there is a lot involved in modern software development compared to when I first started. When I first started, you wrote code and you checked it in. But after 10 years on, it was actually, I do a lot of things. I have to understand infrastructure. I have to understand supporting my system in production. There's lots. Platform engineering teams can focus on paving the road. Are people aware of the concept of paving the road or the golden path? Hands up for anyone? Yeah, generally, good. It's about building a set of options that work well together, that make life easy, so you can build, release, and operate software in a particular way, but you allow people to go off the path if they have to. It gives team autonomy where it matters, but it shouldn't be mandatory. And I get a lot of pushback from platform engineering teams about this, because it's we know that this is the best way of doing it. Fine, let people vote with their feet. So it's a useful feedback mechanism if people have the option to not use the stuff you built. You find out whether you actually understood the need. Because if people decide not to use the stuff you built, they're taking on something that's probably more complicated. They have to support it. They have to do patching and upgrades, and they have to make sure the logs get to log aggregation tool. If they're doing that, likely you really have missed the boat in what you're trying to build. And you leave space for innovation. And this is another thing I used to have a lot of conversations with. The central platform team do not have a monopoly on good ideas. Sometimes another team has heard about something and they're really enthusiastic and they go off and they try it, and then you end up going, actually, you know what, that is really good, and that's what we should be using more generally. Maybe they go off and try something and it doesn't ever make sense to have it be as part of the platform because they're solving a very specific need. It's not common across everybody, and you can't solve everybody's problems. And sometimes they do it because you don't have time. As a platform team, you haven't done it yet. And they need it now. They always need it now, and they've told you about it with a week to spare and magically expect you to solve it. But let them go off and do something. You do have to have a discussion about what will happen long term. Is it going to be handed back to you? Because I have had a lot of cases as a director of platform engineering where I've had to say, no, I'm not taking this thing because you've built it in a different technology that we don't support, and it doesn't matter to us. You don't just get to throw it at us when you decide that you don't like managing it. But that space for innovation is important. So, having said that, I'm not sure about platform as a thing, but how do you actually build something that people will use, that you're spending your time wisely and you're building something that's compelling? Well, you want to aim for something that delights your customers. You should treat it as a product. You need to talk to them. And this, for people who were infrastructure engineers, often you end up as an infrastructure engineer and you want to just focus on the tech problems, on the hard stuff, but you do actually need to talk to the people who are going to use your platform. Find out what the missing features are. The advantage if you're inside an organization is your customers are right there. And they're within the same context as you. They have the same cultural and technology constraints that you have. You understand it. You should be able to solve their problem in a way because you know what you're doing. You also need to listen to your customers. You need to listen to them. What we tried to do was be, in a non-creepy way, just be in various meetings. We say, can we come along to your dev huddle and just, see what you're talking about? And people would be talking about their problems. And we could say, well, there is a solution there. Either we've built the solution or actually we know this other group has solved it. So a little bit knowledge transfer across the whole of the organization. We would go to their showcases. People would be showing what they'd just done and talk about what they were going to do next. And often we go, okay, that's great. Now we know what's coming. We can do something useful. So listening's good. Asking people. We used to send out surveys, and we'd ask people, what do you like about this? What don't you like? And as long as you've got a reputation for listening, people will take the time to give you that feedback, to fill out surveys, and it can be incredibly useful. The team that managed our DNS infrastructure sent out a survey, and people said, look, we really love the fact that you've moved to manage this as infrastructure as code, and that we can basically put in some new DNS configuration in a repo and open a PR. But often it takes you hours or a day to approve it, and it's not really a very risky change. And the team basically went, they looked at all the changes that had ever happened and how much debate they had, and they recognized certain patterns where they could automatically approve something because it was low risk. It was removing something, adding something. It was something where they felt they understood it. So they improved it significantly by talking to people and listening to what they were saying. I think you need to be really careful about, oh yeah, that sounds good. And I don't know whether this is a British thing, but people will go, yeah, that sounds great. And they don't mean it. They're just not giving you their real thoughts. Or they're like, yeah, in the abstract, that sounds great, but obviously we're busy with other stuff for a year. So I think you need to be looking for, and also it's your idea, so you think it's great, so you're only hearing the, yes, they loved it. You need to basically say, would you adopt it next quarter? And if people don't say, yes, we're dying to use this, then maybe you're not actually building something that they love. I also think it's worth trying to do a quadrant of, how long would it take us to do this thing and how much value? Because things that are quick with some aspect of value are worth doing. You want to have that sense of momentum. Quick wins are good, particularly when you're first setting these things up. You need to demonstrate the value of what you're doing. You cannot go away and spend a year building a platform with no visible progress. Like politically in an organization, that is a dangerous thing to do, because I'm going to tell you that there are very few CTOs, let alone CIOs or board level people, who actually care about the platform that you're building. So you need to find a way to translate it into stuff that they do care about. We're going to save you money, we're going to make it secure, we're going to speed everyone else up, and you have to demonstrate how you're doing that. So marketing. I feel like, I'm an engineer. People really hate the idea of selling themselves or selling their team, but you have to do it. Like I've heard Daniel talk about internal DevRel, like the idea that DevRel helps people learn how to adopt technologies, and you learn from your users. And internal DevRel is the same thing, but inside your organization, going out there and teaching people how to use the stuff that you've built. You build examples. You go and work with people. You demonstrate how easy it is to use the stuff. You write blog posts, internally or externally. Quite often, we found that writing a blog post for the externally facing FT blog would also work very well internally. It gives it a stamp of approval. You have to explain it in language anyone could understand, who's not in the context of the FT, but it sells it to your internal engineers. It makes it feel official because you've announced it. Mostly teams do not do enough communication. They assume that everything they send out, people engage with. But people are on holiday. They miss the all-hands meeting. They aren't in that Slack channel or the email group. Not every engineer at the FT was in the every engineer at the FT Slack channel. Some of them had decided to leave it. You can't control it. And people may not have been paying attention. It wasn't relevant to them at the time, and 6 months later, they come back and they're like, oh, I really need to solve this problem, but they can't remember what happened. You need to repeat the message. You need to do it in different ways. So, we found when we were in the office, posters in the kitchen were probably the most effective way to tell people about stuff, because people are making tea and they're bored and they read the poster. Too often I saw teams send out one email, we have launched this new product, and then they're like, tick, we've done it. And that is just it's not enough. And I love this. It's from a blog post by Jason Yip, and it's from his colleague Alia Rose Connor, and she's basically saying it's not enough to transmit. You have to make sure the message has been received, it's been understood, they actually agree with it, and they've converted it into something they're going to do. And I think you have to check on all of those other things if you really want to get anywhere. And I had a colleague who was excellent at this, Alice Bartlett. She used to send individual emails to named people saying, I noticed that you and your team are using this API that we're going to deprecate. Do you have a plan for moving off it? When I get something directly to me, I actually really respond to it. It works. You need to show off. It means that you should talk about your successes. You should invite your customers to share their stories. We used to try and get, in every one of our platform engineering showcases, someone from one of our customer teams to come and talk about how we had solved a problem for them. And that was because, my boss and my boss's boss were in those showcases, and we're demonstrating that what we're doing is worthwhile, because they're the ones that allocate time and money within the department. I want them to keep in mind that we are a team that does stuff, that delivers results. My CIO said, I went to see her one time on a Friday afternoon just to tell her something, and she said, no one ever comes to my office on a Friday afternoon with good news. So after that, I used to, about every month or so, I would kind of walk past and go, let me just show you this new dashboard that my team have created. It's not that she cares about the dashboard, but she liked the fact she was hearing about the stuff we were doing, and it kept her aware that we were making progress. It's not just about getting it right. You do actually need to look at how you're doing and look for the signs that you are not getting this right, you're getting it wrong. Are you doing the wrong things? Are you building something when you could buy it? Maybe because you don't know there's something there you could buy, or maybe because you can't get the budget. And sometimes organizations have weird incentives. It was a lot easier for me at the FT to get a team to spend a year building a product than it was to get the budget to buy it. But you should make that argument, because that's just not an effective way of spending your time. Working out that you're missing some expertise. Sometimes I found that there were a team that owned a selection of capabilities, and they never seemed to want to do any work on some of them. And actually, it was because they didn't feel confident in that area. They didn't feel they understood it as well. And if you don't spot it, you just find people aren't paying attention to it. But if you do, you can send people for training. You can make sure you recruit for that gap. But having that conversation is important. Do you ever actually turn things off? If you don't finish the move to something, you're supporting the old thing and the new thing. And you will get to the point where you don't have time to do anything interesting, because all you're doing is maintaining all of this long tail of stuff that you never quite finished. Do you have a reputation for delivering something and never, ever going back and making any improvements? And this happens, I've seen this happen a lot, because you basically finish it, you do the MVP, and then you go to the next burning fire that you need to do. But an MVP is not an MVP if you never, ever go back and make changes. And people are like using this slightly shoddy thing. Sometimes it's enough, but often it's not, and you need to seek feedback. People who are using it, is it good enough? What could we do to improve it? And you should look at adoption rates. I think it's a great idea to think about, how would I know that this is being actively used? How am I going to measure that this is solving a problem? And if you check in on all of these signs, you should get a chance to course correct and get back on track. I'm going to call out documentation specifically, because no one seems to really like doing documentation. But it is the single thing that will give you space to do everything else. Because if you write good documentation that answers people's questions, you will have more time to do the stuff that's actually interesting for you. And we aimed at the FT, and this is a bit small, but we aimed at the FT for consistent documentation. When I took over that group, in the first quarter, we moved every bit of documentation to be in the same place, because every team had chosen their own tool. So you had to know what team built something to find the documentation. So we moved it all to one place. And we set up a template so they all looked the same. So as a customer, you go familiar. And it starts with, how do I do this? How do I get access? What do I do with it? We also brought in a technical writer to train us. So we had workshops where we basically, everybody, and across my team we had people with various levels of familiarity with writing stuff. We had people where, a lot of people were English was their second language. We wanted to help them to feel confident to do that. So I think that's really important. You have to work out your principles, which can help in deciding how to prioritize and how to approach the work. Your understanding, agreeing on what good looks like. And I think I've got a few, and I'm running slightly over, so I'll do this quite quickly. But you should build things to be self-service. You want people to be able to get going without having to wait for you to allocate them a key. You should own and support them for the long term. I've had too many places where people basically decide that they're not going to do this anymore, and you've got a bunch of people who are still on this product thinking, well, what do I do now? You do not want to get a reputation for canning stuff. You need to have a commitment that you are there, you're helping people, and you are maintaining stuff. And if you need them to move off it, you're going to help them migrate. Things should be easy to use. They should be consistent. If you've got multiple APIs, use the same field names. Make it so that people don't get confused because the thing is different, and build in all of the defaults so that things are so that people do the right thing. So we wanted people to do runbooks, so we don't want them to have to go and read about doing a runbook. We just made it so that, we scored them and we showed people their score and said, oh, like across this group you're doing pretty well. And we had a bit of gamification, and people would send me a message saying, hey, we've overtaken you. We have a better set of runbooks than your team. For about half an hour, my team were like, very much, we are now going to improve our runbooks. Allow people to use the tools that you've built in ways you didn't expect, because that's going to happen. So build it in components so people can take just the bits they want. We had some serverless blueprints, so if you wanted to do stuff with Lambdas using the serverless framework, you could come and copy the idea of how to do it. Now, you do have the problem, it's a template, so when it changes, it's hard to keep it up to date, but it got people started. None of this is unique to the FT. I am nearly finished. But I love this paper. It's really worth reading. But I was really happy to see that it's the same list about what are the attributes of a great platform. So wrapping up, to build a platform people actually use, you need to listen to your customers, understand their needs. You need to talk to your customers, tell them about what you've built repeatedly, and you need to be guided by a set of sensible principles. So building things that are consistent, easy to use, self-service. It makes it easy to make decisions about what you're going to do. And I have a book. It's got a chapter about platform engineering. I believe that there's a copy available in the raffle. And come and talk to me. I'm here the rest of the day. I would love to get people's views on all of this, and I'm sorry for running over. Thanks. Thank you.